ability live, couldn't, there's 13 seconds, Mike. He would give you 13 seconds, really, all those important anchor skills. You could feel it very well. Yeah, that's his latest thing. He might have mentioned last back when he was having those temper tantrums. Look, man, I got Lyme disease. It's just the Lyme disease. Lyme disease is what's throwing the sponge. He was notorious. Wow. But it was like the big thing, I mean, weekend NBC today, throwing shit. You threw shit at me?
No. Hi, I'm Mike Schneider. I used to host Good Morning America. And
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I didn't ask about your history in this place.
Also, I have Lyme disease. Chasing News, apparently. He's on Chasing News. Chasing News is a news program.
I want to hear how you describe this.
Is that?
What time is it? Like 3 hours left.
Is the local television news, which is how many features are full. I think about that. This is the one.
Yeah, no, this is the other one.
Okay.
Are you sure though? They look, because look, look at the third page of that one compared to this one.
I just want to see I asked and made sure we're keeping that on below.
Okay. That's fine.
Yeah. He's going to do Joey Torres. This is them. She's with us, NJTV. She's my boss. Yeah, there used to be a lot more. I was a State House scribe. In the aughts. I would say in the last 10 years, really. Yeah. Half of reporters covering State House. How many words? 14 State House people? Wow.
We might still be the largest. 14
The business, I think.
Larger trend.
So Hoboken a year later, like anything specific about it?
But in retrospect, yeah, right. Especially like one of these presses where he's talking about 20 different people. On our NJTV.
Now it's on Christie's.
Right. So this guy, Christie, right? Yeah. Mike, got it.
Do you know if anyone's going to ask?
So, for the record, all previous online comments are no longer operable.
Ask about the what?
The Hoboken train a year later, the train crash in Hoboken?
I'm gonna guess no. You could ask though. Raise your hand.
He wanted to know if you would ask.
Anybody besides the
If,
cameraman would
you know, if we're running down on, questions, there you go. You know what it's about?
You just telling me to do.
38%.
A year after the broken derailment.
Battery is dying.
And then a bunch of others.
What's the question?
The battery's dying now.
Yes.
Yeah, what's been going on, I guess.
Yeah, where they at now, have they received, did they receive?
No, we're not gonna leave that for her to ask though, because we'll fuck that up. NJ Transit. I mean, she will.
Although would
No
that be more of
background.
an Amtrak?
She's from freaking Australia, dude.
Yeah, but it was on Amtrak tracks, I believe, right?
Don't know.
Let's ask Christie. What's that?
Wait, no, are you talking about the smash into the wall in Hoboken?
That was,
That was an NJ Transit train.
yeah, but don't they use the Amtrak tracks?
Now you're just complicating things,
So
man.
what's the issue that they?
All right, but the operator.
There's a bunch of issues coming out of one, not the least of which is screening for sleep apnea with engineers. I don't know how sleep apnea though affects, I guess, because you can't focus.
No, sleep. That's what happened with that guy, right?
That's what they're saying, yeah.
But you can't focus when you're asleep.
Yeah.
Can't multitask.
So is that what the argument is?
I know that he
How late,
was not alert as he was, he should have been going 10 miles an hour, he was going 25 or something like that. And then stopped too late and rammed into the end of the platform and caused much damage and one woman was killed as a result.
Is it?
So it's been a year. You lose track of time.
When the conversation on this is $10 and all that,
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions in there, so, knowing him, he'll say, what exactly are you talking about? Exactly, you'll be like, I've seen that happen. And then he will say, you know what, understand the story that you're asking about before you ask a question. Little Missy. Has he ever called anybody Little Missy?
Brian Murray called.
No.
Brian
What?
Murray called Shrill.
Shrill, yeah. Where is Katie, by the way? She was on with us today. Oh, the one in the red dress today? She came on Jenny.
Breakfast on too, right?
Yes. And, Sal.
I guess that you and Sal speak Spanish.
Sal habla español.
They'll be coming through this door here, guys.
You sneaky man. Oh.
Doing a great job, Ronnie. Good news story. Huh? It's a good news story. I hear that before. It's a good news story. Like it's good news. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Friday. I welcome General Kniff and Colonel Fuentes. As we all know, our friends and families in Puerto Rico are struggling to recover from the destruction that was brought on them by both Hurricanes Irma and Maria. Today, I signed Executive Order number 233 so that New Jersey can move more efficiently to respond to the island's needs by mobilizing not only the New Jersey National Guard, our state police, and our Office of Emergency Management, but also our municipal, county, and private sector resources. All told, New Jersey will deploy more than 1,100 emergency responders and soldiers to Puerto Rico. By placing local support under the direction of OEM, this executive order ensures the safe, timely, coordinated, and effective delivery of critical personnel and equipment to Puerto Rico so that we do not have individual groups or organizations trying to self-deploy. When I was at the White House yesterday, had a number of conversations about this, and there has to be an organized approach to this because there's lots of supplies and things that the island needs that are sitting at the port and aren't able to be moved yet because of logistical problems on the island. We don't want to add to that problem. We want to try by sending our folks down there to contribute to the solution. So what that means is that all local police and emergency personnel as needed will be designated to bolster the New Jersey State Police and National Guard members and the equipment that we are mobilizing to the island. So if you hear any announcements from other folks, whether it's the Newark Police Department, the Jersey City Police Department, any other police department, we welcome all the help, but that help cannot be mobilized separately. This executive order requires that all of that be run by the state police and the Office of Emergency Management so that we do so in a coordinated way. I remember from Sandy when lots of people wanted to help and send help here. Sometimes folks came and they hadn't been asked for. They just showed up, and it was frustrating for them that we didn't have something for them to do right away. If we have this stuff coordinated beforehand, we can assign certain sectors to them, and now we can have certain sectors assigned to us to handle so that we don't go forward in a kind of haphazard way. The state police have a deployment plan similar to the responses I just mentioned during Superstorm Sandy. The deployment will address the loss of police services at a time when the protection of life and property on the island is most urgent. Under my direction, the state police are launching an operation called NJ Pride, Puerto Rico Integrated Deployment Effort. That will involve a deployment of 600 police, troopers, firefighters, and medical personnel over a period of 6 weeks. The National Guard is mobilizing another 500 responders and has an additional 2,500 standing ready if needed and requested by the government in Puerto Rico. NJ Pride will be fully self-sufficient and will provide public safety and general police service to a designated and devastated area inside Puerto Rico. An advanced team of state police and state emergency management commanders are arriving in Puerto Rico today and tomorrow to prepare for the full deployment thereafter. Their individual specialties will involve emergency management, law enforcement operations, logistics, planning, communications, and intelligence and analysis. Over the past week, our team has been in constant contact with the Puerto Rico National Police and FEMA to prepare for the arrival of this advanced team in their mission. I have also spoken to Governor Rossello 3 different times at length to assess their needs, to give advice, and to offer our support. We know all too well how important this assistance is in the time of crisis, but that it be done in a way that is orderly and organized so that it helps and doesn't add to the confusion. To assemble this first deployment, we're working through the county prosecutors in Union, Essex, Passaic, Hudson, and Bergen, to include the cities of Newark, Patterson, and Jersey City, as well as the Northeast New Jersey Urban Area Security Initiative, to tap into their rapid deployment teams. Those are teams of police officers who are additionally trained in responses to critical incidents. Moving forward, successive deployments will involve county prosecutors and first responders throughout the rest of the state, and I want to thank Attorney General Perino for the role that he's playing as well in helping to coordinate this response. Additionally, 2 New Jersey National Guard armories will be operating on Monday as donation centers to aid hurricane relief efforts in Puerto Rico. The armories will be used to warehouse donations gathered through a partnership among the State Office of Emergency Management, the Center for Hispanic Policy, Research and Development, and the Governor's Office of Volunteerism to assist the New Jersey for Puerto Rico hurricane relief effort. The partnership also is working to inform the public of the specific supplies and items needed in Puerto Rico and how to responsibly donate both money and supplies to be sent there. The armories will only store donations collected and organized through governing bodies, corporations, local institutions, and recognized community-based organizations. The armories will not accept any items dropped off by individuals. So to the public out there, work through one of your local community organizations. Please don't start driving to one of these armories and start dropping off, a couple of cases of water or, paper goods or things like that. That will not be helpful. We want to do it through organizations to make it, again, more orderly and more effective. To schedule a delivery of donated items to be transported to Puerto Rico, or for information on how you can help with our efforts, you can call 1-833-NJ-HELPS. That's 1-833-NJ-HELPS. That line will help to coordinate any donations and contributions that anyone in the state would like to make to this effort. We have seen time again the generosity of the people of our state, and more importantly, we have been the recipient of others' generosity during the fall of 2012 when we were hit so hard by Hurricane Sandy. I can tell you that in my conversations with Governor Rossello, this is a really difficult time for him. He's only been in office now about 8 months, and it's a deja vu moment for me listening to him on the other end of the phone. And so to the extent that I've been able to help him craft and organize the people around him in their response, I'm going to continue to do that and continue to do it in a personal way with him. So I look forward to continuing to work with him. I want to first ask Colonel Fuentes to now come up and give some more specifics regarding the New Jersey State Police response. Then General Kniff will come up and give some more detailed response regarding the New Jersey National Guard deployment, and then I'll come back to take your questions. So, Colonel Fuentes.
Thank you. Thanks, Governor. Good afternoon, everybody. So the Governor just gave a very, very detailed brief about our deployment, so I'm going to be brief. Basically, there's been a precedent for this with state police and state OEM. This is basically a dusting off of the template that we used at Hurricane Katrina in 2005, and that we used once again with Superstorm Sandy in 2012. This deployment of 600 is over a period of 6 weeks. Each has an operational period of 2 weeks, so there's 3 operational periods. Each operational period of 2 weeks, there will be a response of 200 local and county police officers, troopers, medical responders, and also fire service. Because when you're dealing with an environment like I know we're going to confront in Puerto Rico, it's going to be very much like Sandy, and it's going to be very much like New Orleans, where you have a lot of mold, you have great propensity for disease and infection, and it's important to decontaminate after every patrol, so that you don't bring those elements back to where you may be bunking and where the rest of the group is. So as the governor pointed out, the purpose of this is that we've seen this over and over again in response to hurricanes. In the aftermath, you sometimes see a profound loss of police services. In the case of New Orleans, some of the police went to tend to their families. Some had no houses. Same thing is happening in Puerto Rico, and we understand that they are down by as much as 70% on their police force. So now that the water has drained out, there is a dire need for security services on the island. And that's going to be the purpose of NJ Pride, to go down there to relieve the Puerto Rico Police Department, which incidentally is the state police force of Puerto Rico. Just today, just an hour ago, we were in touch with the Deputy Chief of the Puerto Rico Police Department. We're trying to frame out an exact mission and a location where they most need us. The people that we're sending down, both the police officers who are members of rapid deployment teams, which are under the control of the prosecutors, these are highly trained police officers that are additionally trained beyond what you expect in law enforcement to address tactical, critical incidents within their counties. So that's sort of a just add water solution for us in going after the most qualified police officers and integrate them into this mission. That will compose the 100 that we're going to take out of each 200 deployment over those 3 operational periods. The troopers are all, as the governor pointed out, experts in logistics, communications, patrol operations, and emergency management functions. Many of them have been, if not all of them, have been through Sandy and have been through Hurricane Katrina. So the element that's going down there is very highly trained. The Puerto Rico Police Department is extremely happy that we're offering the support, and they thank the governor, and they thank OEM and all of law enforcement and the fire service and emergency responder community in New Jersey. So thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. I'm Michael Kniff, the Adjutant General of the State of New Jersey. We're currently preparing for what would be the largest out-of-state mobilization of New Jersey National Guard troops since Hurricane Katrina. The troops are well prepared and run the gambit of aviators, security forces, logisticians, communication specialists, to men and women who will build roads and buildings. We are prepared to send our very best. Here's where we stand today. Our response to Hurricane Maria began 14 September with the deployment of 26 Air National Guard security forces from the 108th Joint Base McGuire-Dix Lakehurst to the Virgin Islands. Our JTAPS, Joint Tactical Air Control Party from the 177th Fighter Wing at Egg Harbor Township, New Jersey, is currently in Puerto Rico assisting in air traffic control. The departure of approximately 40 soldiers from Charlie Company of the 250th Brigade Engineering Battalion in Lawrenceville is imminent. These soldiers are communication experts and will assist Puerto Rico, the civilian authorities, in restoring voice and data communications on the island. The follow-on force of more than 500 airmen and soldiers will depart as part of a task force which includes the state police. These units tasked in this task force include elements of the 42nd Regional Support Group in Somerset, soldiers from the 119th Combat Sustainment Support Battalion in Vineland, Alpha Company, West Orange, Bravo Company, Hamilton, of the 104th Brigade Engineering Battalion, Charlie Company from Jersey City of the State's Medical Command, elements of the 328th Military Police Company out of Cherry Hill, a civil engineering team from the 108th Joint Base McGuire-Dix Lakehurst, and elements of the 150th Assault Helicopter Battalion of Lakehurst to include 4 UH-60 Black Hawk helicopters. In addition, planners from the 44th Infantry Combat Brigade Team of Lawrenceville, the largest unit in the New Jersey National Guard of approximately 3,500 people, soldiers, is preparing and mobilizing for possible deployment as requested by Puerto Rico. And as in the last hour, we've received our first request for another 40 soldiers from that brigade. During Superstorm Sandy, the National Guard troops from across this nation came to help us when we were in need, and our soldiers and airmen are grateful for this opportunity to help our fellow neighbors at their time of assistance. Thank you.
Thank you, General. Appreciate it. All right, questions?
Governor, could you put some perspective on the magnitude of this response by the state as it compares especially to the recent hurricane that affected Houston?
It's the largest one that we've done since Katrina. So, and I think it's appropriate. in response to the level of devastation, not only to the loss of services there, but they're having trouble now even moving the supplies that they're receiving daily, both by plane and by boat, out of the port. The governor told me that most of the port workers have not shown up for work. So as a result, they can't unload the containers. So they've got 2 weeks or more of supplies, both of fuel and of food and water, that are sitting at the port in containers, waiting to be unloaded and then deployed across the island, which they can't do because they don't have enough people down there yet to do that. So now what the president is doing is sending military down there, both in the National Guard guys and also in our regular military forces, to be able to assist them in that regard. So it's something that's really needed, and we wanted to step up in a significant way. The governor, I reached out for the governor very early after this happened. He has reached back out for me, as I said, a number of times since then, to get further advice and counsel on how to approach some of this and to help run some interference for him as well, which I've done. So it's a big deployment. It's the biggest that we've had in my time as governor, but I think that the desperate nature of the situation in Puerto Rico merits that level of response. Yeah.
Do you think that it took too long to get the Lieutenant General Buchanan to Puerto Rico? Should that have been action have been taken sooner?
Now, my understanding from Homeland Security Advisor Bossert was that the Lieutenant General was on the case, from their headquarters. And I think, for those of you, and I don't remember how many of you were around, I know a number of you were for Sandy, sometimes having too much around you is injurious too. And I think that what my understanding of from the Homeland Security Advisors, what they were trying to do was go down there and get a sense of exactly what was needed, and then send the general down there at that point to get eyes on, to make whatever amendments needed to be made to the plan. But my understanding from the governor himself is that there has not been a lack of resources being sent there. It's getting the resources to the people. The logistics are the biggest problem right now. So, he told me they have at least 2 weeks of food and water, and I think he told me 17 days of fuel at the port in Puerto Rico, but have not been able to get the logistics to move it. Part of that is people. The other part is as they start to move this stuff, so many of the roadways have been completely washed away that when they start to move in a particular direction, then the road is gone. So that's why us sending down some of our folks who have expertise from Sandy in the National Guard in rebuilding roadways, along with folks from the private sector from an engineering perspective, will be helpful as well. So I don't think it took too long. I mean, listen, I can't micromanage it from here. I haven't been at the table like I was for Sandy. But what I will tell you is the reason my inclination is that is because too many people right in the beginning can be as much of a distraction as it's a problem of having too little. So, every time someone new would come in, some brass would come in during Sandy, I'd have to take time out to meet with them. And then their staff would want to meet with my staff. And that's all fine, but that's all time being taken away from actually substantively responding. And that's why I like the approach the colonel is taking, which is just give us a sector of the island you want us to take care of. We don't want to get in your hair. Like, what's a sector of the island where you're concerned that there's not sufficient law enforcement presence? Send us to that sector, and we will police that sector for you over the next 6 weeks. And then you don't even have to worry about it. That really comes from our experience in Sandy and his experience in Katrina. So that's the way we're trying to approach it, and the way we're trying to be most helpful, Mike. Yeah, Elise.
What is the cost of this operation, and what happens if there's a natural disaster in New Jersey? Will these folks get recalled?
Well, I'm sure they would if there was something that happened here. In terms of the cost, that's something that will be reimbursed by the federal government for. It's got through the normal EMAC process. So right now what they want us to do is just get the resources there. We'll worry about the costs later on. But we'll be reimbursed by the federal government. Matt?
Okay, so we're talking about 1,100 people for 6 weeks. They include guardsmen, guard women, state police,
local police, firefighters.
And things like that. And it's a 6-week time period?
For right now.
Okay.
And then we'll reassess it at the end of that time. But the initial deployment is for 6 weeks, and then we'll see where we go from there based upon what the conditions are on the ground in Puerto Rico and what their needs continue to be. We're not saying we won't continue with it for longer than that, but 6 weeks is a good starting point given our past experience, and then we'll see where we go from there based upon what conditions on the island are. I will tell you that I'm sure there'll be other states that'll be stepping up in a big way during that period of time as well that may be able to relieve us and relieve our obligation there. But we wanted to be one of the first states to step forward in a significant way to be able to put people down there.
And how quickly do you expect to, sorry if I missed this,
Yeah.
how quickly do you expect to be on the ground?
Well, some are down there already.
Okay.
Some are down there already. And remember, one of the big problems of Puerto Rico is the entire air traffic control system went down. And they only have about 40% of it back up yet. And so you can't fly as many planes as frequently as you normally would into San Juan or other parts of Puerto Rico because of the destruction, complete destruction, as I was explained by the governor. That after the storm went through, they had no air traffic control system at all. The United States military has gone down there and rebuilt, along with the FAA, about 40% of their capability that's allowing planes to come in. So basically, Matt, what we're doing here is we're allowing DOD to coordinate for us our transport down there in compliance with the limited air traffic control they have now. David.
Governor, it's not like it was a big secret that there was this massive storm heading to this island. Half the people in the country still don't have water. I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with the statistics, 90% of the island without electricity. Is this disaster relief effort a disaster?
No, it's not. Listen, the disaster is the disaster, David. I mean, let's make sure you understand something. The electric grid and power system in Puerto Rico was degraded already before this storm. And so, for instance, in Sandy, because we had properly maintained and funded infrastructure in our electrical grid. Remember, we had 2/3 of the state did not have power for 2 weeks. In a state that's not an island, in a state that had the ability to bring electrical workers from all over the area, and you'll remember from covering it, we had trucks from Alabama, Texas, Louisiana. People just got in their trucks and drove here. Can't do that in Puerto Rico. And remember, Puerto Rico is bankrupt. And so you have the other added problem of getting private sector involvement in this because they have no creditworthiness at the moment, right? So there's a whole bunch of things that you might have done in preparation for this that as a state, they didn't have the wherewithal to do. And so, and remember that the federal government was dealing then both with significant disasters in both Florida and Texas. So I think the biggest problem here is twofold. And it's what we confronted here, but they're confronting it in a much more major way. It's loss of power and interrupted logistics because your roadways are impassable. Now, our roadways were impassable mostly, except for 287 and 80, where the roadways actually had washed away and we had to rebuild them. We're mostly unpassable because of debris. So once we got Ashburn in here to remove the debris, the roadways were clear and our logistics would be better. My understanding from talking to Governor Rossello is that in many parts of the island, one of the problems they're having in getting water or food to folks is the roadways are gone and need to be rebuilt from scratch. That's a significant problem. We only had one of those roadways to deal with up in Morris County at the intersection of 287 and 80. And Jim Simpson did a spectacular job. If you don't believe him, just ask him. He did a spectacular job in getting that rebuilt really quickly. But they're talking about broadly. So the military is going to have to come in with some more airlifting. I'm sure there's going to be the use of helicopters and other types of planes to get some of those materials to food and water to those folks. But the problem is that you're dealing with an island, A, and B, an island whose infrastructure was already aging and in bad shape because of the financial difficulties that Puerto Rico was having as a territory. So, I think that it's always difficult to armchair quarterback this stuff from a distance. I know that better than anybody. And I think that now what you're looking for have people do and respond to is we're going to have to essentially rebuild this island. I mean, what the American people have to be ready for, and the people of Puerto Rico have to be ready for, is this is going to be a years long. Think about it. New Jersey's 5 years in, and we've done, and we'll talk about this as we get into the 5-year anniversary of Sandy, but we have done markedly better than New York in every type of measure you could ask for. And we still have about 1,000 families who have gone through the REM program but do not have their homes fully rebuilt yet. And we're dealing with an intact infrastructure and an intact power grid. Think about if you had your power grid completely wiped away and had to rebuild it, and roads completely wiped away. So I think the president is going to have some tough decisions to make in terms of the way this gets funded and financed, because, you know, in a lot of these aid programs that we enjoyed the benefit of, we would have a 10% match in some of them, a 20% match in others, a 30% match in others. Puerto Rico doesn't have the money to match. And that's going to be a huge part of the problem, and Congress is going to have to take up the question of whether or not the American taxpayer is going to shoulder the entire cost for rebuilding all these things in Puerto Rico. And I know that's something that the White House and the Congress are going to have to consider as they go through this, which is different than here. So I want to make sure everybody understands that the challenges being faced by the government in Puerto Rico and by the federal government assisting them are significantly different than the ones they faced in Sandy, in Houston with Harvey, or with Irma in Florida. Yeah.
Do you think that there is the political will to engage in this kind of massive reconstruction for an island that sometimes is considered an independent nation?
Listen, territorial law and relationships are always a little bit different than the ones we have with the individual states, and that presents some challenges, David. But I do think that you've seen already a real outpouring of concern from the American people, and I think most politicians take their cues from the American people. So I would hope that we're going to be able to find a way to partner with Puerto Rico to get this done. But I will tell you too, it can't be something where Puerto Rico isn't involved. Puerto Rico has to be involved because they have sovereignty too. They're a sovereign territory. They have their own government. Governor Rosello is an independently elected governor, and I don't advocate for the federal government taking over Puerto Rico. I think the governor is elected. He should have the opportunity to run his territory. So you got to walk that line, okay? Because I don't think it would be right, this is my opinion at the moment, given what I know, for the federal government to federalize this situation. My conversations with the governor indicate to me that he is a good, decent, competent man who's trying to do the best he can under an enormously difficult burden. And I don't think we should make that burden political by doing that. So do I think the American people have the will? I think that the American people have shown over and over again that when fellow members of this country are hurting, that the American people step up and that they demand their government step up. Sometimes it happens real quick, like in Harvey. Sometimes it takes a little longer, like it did in Sandy.
Should it take 3 weeks for Congress to consider an aid package while people, are buried in mud?
Well, let me say this. The initial response, I think, has been good in terms of the immediate things that FEMA needs to get down there. I think there's over 2,000 members of FEMA on the island already, was the number I heard yesterday when I was in Washington. And, Congress needs to get back to work and to approve a longer-term package. But in this sense, too, David, it's a little more complicated because all of the normal programs that we've set up, really starting with Katrina, and that we then refined during Sandy, they all have a certain percentage of match to them. Almost all of them have a percentage of match when you're dealing with the state, not the individuals, but with the state. So the question is, can Puerto Rico meet their match? Because if they can't, then you've got to do different legislation than you have on the books right now, so that the current programs wouldn't necessarily fit. So that's where this is a little more complicated, because you have a territory right now that is in such bad financial straits that I don't know how much cash they have on hand, but I kind of doubt they would have the kind they would need to be able to put up and guarantee a significant match between 10 and 30%, depending on the program, that you would need. So it's a little more complicated for Congress than it would be in Harvey or in Irma, where they just had to authorize funding for existing programs. You may need different kind of programs here because of the financial circumstances in Puerto Rico. In the interim, though, the emergency aid that needs to go is going. The food, the water, and the fuel and all the rest of that is going down there. Now the challenge is to do what we're trying to do as a team here and be a part of that team to contribute to the logistical problem that will get these supplies to the people who need them so they can ride this portion of the crisis out while the bigger question of the long-term rebuild of Puerto Rico can be determined by Congress and the President.
Considering the infrastructure woes there, how difficult will it be to get the New Jersey personnel to where they need to go? What kind of material and gear will they be taking with them to effect those tasks?
We'll take everything that we think we need. We're not going to depend on anything being down there for us. In terms of us getting where we need to go, that's why Colonel Fuentes has already sent an advance team down there to get the lay of the land and to be able to advise before we send the larger deployment up, and why General Kniff has done the same thing. So there are advance teams that are down that are arriving today and tomorrow on the ground in Puerto Rico to be able to give the command structure here a brief on what else we might need to send. And that's why I think the colonel is attempting to, on the law enforcement side, in dealing with the deputy chief of the Puerto Rican State Police, is to say, where do you need us to be so that we can get there right away? And you can help to get us there so that we can take over a specific part of this island and take over the law enforcement for that sector of it and take that burden off you. So that's why we have advanced teams going down. We know what reports we're getting by phone, but it's much different, for us in terms of planning the logistics to see it ourselves, and that's why they're sending those advanced teams down. Yeah.
Governor, on the Amazon application, are you looking to try to push through some of the amendments to Grow New Jersey? Are you going to try to get that done by the end of your term?
Oh yeah, it will be done. It's been agreed to by both major party candidates. It's been agreed to by the 4 legislative leaders. So it seems to me there'd be no impediment to getting that done during lame duck and getting that in place, and that's the assurance that those letters that we've received from Senator Sweeney, Speaker Prieto, Leader Kane, Leader Bramnick, Ambassador Murphy, and Lieutenant Governor Guadagno will give to Amazon, that this will be done before I leave.
What's the time frame on that? Do you think October, November?
No, they won't be back till after the election. Right, so they won't be back till after the election. So it'll be sometime between mid-November, I'd suspect, and mid-December, that the actual legislation will get done. But I didn't want to wait for that since our package, Michelle, you're here. When's the package have to be into Amazon?
No later than the 19th.
Okay, so October 19th is when the package has to be in. That's why the letters were so important. I did the letters because I knew our legislature wasn't going to come back to change the incentive program before October 19th. So what I wanted was the 6 people, in addition to me, who would have some voice in this, in the lame duck phase of when we came back, so that if Amazon was given the assurance that all 6 people, the 2 who might be governor-elect and the 4 who are the legislative leaders during the lame duck period, all signed off on it, then they know it's going to get done. Because the optimum thing would have been to get the legislation done before October 19th, but they're not going to be back. They're not going to be back till after the election. So that's why, that was my motivation for doing the letters, was to put our best foot forward on October 19th to say, this is the package we're going to offer from an incentive perspective. Even though the law doesn't permit it at this time, we have the letters from the people who can determine whether or not that's going to reach the governor's desk before the end of the year, and you have their written assurance that they are going to get this done.
Is there going to be anything in the package that we haven't seen at this point?
No. It is literally just the lifting of the caps and a couple of the other amendments that are detailed in the letters, but it will permit for a 50,000 job proposal, as Amazon has said it's proposing for this second headquarters, up to $5 billion in incentives.
Sorry, just real quick, just to clarify, this is one point of confusion the other day. It would only apply to companies that were bringing in at least 50,000.
They're called like the transformative type projects. So it's creating a new class which did not previously exist under the former GROW law, which was capped at a certain level because we didn't have a project of this size that anybody was offering to us.
Governor, did you ask Declan O'Scanlan to release that interest arbitration report that came out yesterday? Your press releases were kind of closely tied together.
No, I didn't. I didn't ask him to do it, but I'm happy he did, and I support the fact that he did. Let's keep a few things in mind. All the statistics, the factual data that you see in that report has been in the possession of all 8 members of the committee for 6 months. 6 months. And there's been no objection to the data raised by anybody. This is the same data, by the way, in the same set of data type analysis that came into the first report that was issued in 2014. because we had the same kind of report that got issued then to support whether or not the renewal of the cap was appropriate. And so, you know, and the interesting thing, I've heard all kinds of like, you know, adjectives used by the other side, but they haven't once said there's anything in the report that's wrong.
You said the report is one-sided, maybe missing information.
Well, what information? They've had this information for 6 months. Why, if they have more information, why didn't they come up with it in the last 6 months? I mean, listen, I'm happy to include other information. What information are they talking about? And tell me which is wrong. I mean, there's $530 million less in police and fire salaries than there would have been without the cap. They don't deny that. They don't deny that there's $2.9 billion less in property taxes charged to the people of New Jersey because of the cap on the property taxes and the arbitration cap. They haven't disputed that either. Like, I think I want to make sure you guys don't get distracted here by the rhetoric. Like, ask them, where do you disagree? You've had these numbers for 6 months. If they had a disagreement, why didn't they ask for a factual change to the report? They didn't. You know what they asked for at the meeting? They wanted 7 new studies to be done. 7 new studies. For what? You know for what. They don't want to deal with this now. The unions don't want to deal with this report. They were all hoping it wouldn't come out till December 31st, right? You think maybe that's why they didn't want to vote for it? You think maybe that's why they don't have any answers to this? They don't want to deal with it. You know why? Because it's so obviously good for the people of this state, unless you're a police officer or a firefighter looking to get a big salary increase. And the other thing that's really important in this thing to note is this. Even after the 5 years of this cap, where there were pay increases of a total of about 4.8% for both fire and police during that period of time, even after that, firefighters in New Jersey are the highest paid firefighters in America, and police officers are the second highest paid police officers in America, behind California. So, let me see. Everyone else has saved money. You're still either the highest or second highest paid firefighters and police officers in America. We've saved $2.9 billion in property tax money for folks. And we have 60-some% more people on the eligible list for firefighters and 30-some% more people on the eligible list for police officers. So their idea that somehow people wouldn't apply for these jobs with these kind of caps turned out to be incorrect as well. None of those factual points laid out in the report have been disputed by them. They just say, oh, it's not fair, they released the report. Well, like, when did they want us to release the report? Let me suggest to you, never. They never wanted the report released. And I can guarantee you Ambassador Murphy never wanted the report to be released. Now he's saying, oh, well, it's politics, so I'm not going to respond to it. Let me tell you something. Respond to the facts. Do you think it's good or bad that $530 million in salaries has been saved by the taxpayers? Do you think it's good or bad that property taxes are $2.9 billion lower than it was before? You know, Ambassador, just respond to the facts. I mean, it's kind of really insulting that he takes the work of this task force over the last number of months and you know, calls it what he called it just so that he can avoid answering the question. Let me give him a little advice. If he ever gets to this job, it gets a lot harder to avoid answering the question. Got to answer. And he needs to also.
I just have one more,
Yeah.
back to Amazon.
Mhm.
Just, you know, given the financial realities of the state, is $5 billion in foregone revenue, you know, something the state can actually afford?
Sure, because the EDA has done the net benefit test on it, and we get $9 billion in benefit for $5 billion, so we're net plus $4 billion.
How's that measured, the net?
You could call the EDA, like, I'm not a mathematician, all right? So I guarantee I'd screw it up. So, and Melissa Orson would start twitching and it would be really bad. So just call over to Melissa and she'll walk you through the net benefit rule. It's the same net benefit rule we use for every incentive program we do over there. If there is not a net benefit to the state of the incentive, then we don't grant the incentive. And the number I was told by Melissa Orson was that it was net plus $4 billion, even at the $5 billion level, because you're talking about 50,000 new jobs and all of the taxes that those people will be paying, right? It's not just the corporate tax. All those new employees will be paying income tax. Presumably, they'll be paying sales tax inside the state. And there's a whole calculation that goes on with that. But call Melissa. I'm sure the EDA press folks will walk you through that. But if I do it, I'm just going to get it wrong, and then you're going to have to correct your story when you get the real news. Yeah.
Just off of that, is New Jersey now the first state to pledge a certain amount of trade for Amazon in such specific terms? Have you seen any other state?
Since their proposals don't have to go until October 19th either. I haven't seen anything. I haven't heard anything through the rumor mill about it. I doubt we'll be the only state that does it, but I haven't heard anything else because they haven't had to put theirs in. We're being very open about ours. And part of it's because we're one of only 2 states that are going through an election right now, where there will be a definitive change of leadership in the executive branch, us in Virginia. So I think it's particularly incumbent upon us to be really open about this with them, because otherwise they could use as a reasonable excuse, well, Governor, you say you're going to do this, but you're leaving, and how do we know that one of the 2 people who may come in or the legislative leaders would actually do this? That's why I think we're being this open and public about it, because we're in a different position than 48 other states who may be competing for this because we're going through a change in leadership.
What if Amazon comes back to you and says $5 billion in break is not enough, we want more? What would you do?
My guess is when that happens, I won't be here. It would depend on what else they asked for. I don't got to bid against myself. I think $5 billion is a pretty good bid. Well, he certainly said in his letter that he did. I know he said something different. No. Read his letter. His letter says he supports us pursuing this avenue. Now, I know then the next day he did what he normally does, which was he went and spoke to all of his liberal friends, and they said, how could you have possibly done that? And then he changed his position a little bit. But fortunately for us, this thing will all be adopted before any new governor comes in. And once it's on the statutes, he can't stop it from happening. It's the great thing about the EDA approach to this. It's not political. It's formulaic. If Amazon comes forward with 50,000 new jobs over that course of time, they'll get a $5 billion tax benefit for it.
Does Murphy's comments publicly, even though you have this letter, like jeopardize what you were talking about?
Well, I just think it's childish. Like, make up your mind. You know, if he doesn't like it, he should have written that in the letter. You read the letter. He didn't say he didn't like it in the letter. He didn't say he didn't support it in the letter. He laid out like his plan for New Jersey's economic future, which I was fascinated to read. And I'm sure the Amazon people will really be fascinated to read that too. But grow up. You know, this is my biggest problem with Ambassador Murphy in this campaign. Answer a question. This guy's trying to run out the clock. Answer a question. It's not that hard. And believe me, if he ever gets here, man, you're not going to let him get away with that. You're going to have to answer questions. Because you know what? Bills come to your desk. You either sign them or you don't. You don't say, I'm thinking about it. You get 45 days to think about it. Then you got to do something. You know, so maybe he needs to go brush up back on that stuff. Because if he ever winds up here, he's going to have to actually make some decisions, unlike now, when the only decisions he makes are he's decided the economy's not fair. He sounds like a 12-year-old. Everything he doesn't like isn't fair. I mean, man, I got easier time dealing with my 9th grader than dealing with that stuff. Yes, David. You liked that one, didn't you, David? Yeah, I thought so.
What is your opinion on these protests by NFL players, A? And B, did the president spend too much time engaging in this with all the other stuff?
Listen, he spent more time than I would have, okay? So, but, you know, everybody gets to decide how they want to spend their time. And president gets to decide how he wants to spend his time. So I'm not going to be critical of it. It's more than I would have done, but hey, you know, it's his call. What do I think of it? I think you'll be shocked to hear this. So you're all going to want to write this down because it'll be a shocker. I think the Dallas Cowboys handled it perfectly. You know, I think they locked arms. They took a knee to show that they're unified together in support of equality before the flag came out and before the anthem was played. And then when the flag came out and the anthem was played, they were standing up at attention for respect for our flag and respect for our national anthem. I have no problem with people protesting, but I do think that it's a problem when that protest shows a disrespect for the flag and for our national anthem. I think the way the Cowboys handled it was perfect.
Do you think it's disrespectful for them to kneel during the...
I do think it's disrespectful. Now, I'm not saying they don't have the right to be disrespectful. You're asking me what I think of it. What I think of it is I think it's disrespectful, yeah. I mean, I was taught from the time I was a little kid. When the national anthem starts and the flag comes out, you stand up, you take a hat off if you have it on, and you stand at attention while the national anthem's being played, and you show respect to the flag by holding your hand over your heart. I think that's the respectful way to deal with it. That's not to say they don't have the right to do what they want to do. They do. They have the right to do what they want to do, but also the American people have the right to respond to that if they believe that's disrespectful. That's not saying they don't have a right to do it. That's not trying to take away someone's constitutional right. They have the right to do it. But we have the right to respond in the way that makes us feel. And I do think it's disrespectful for people to take a knee or to be seated during the national anthem while the flag is being honored. But I acknowledge their right to do it. That's why I think the Cowboys did it so well. So for all the Eagles fans and Giants fans out there, I want to repeat one more time. I think the Cowboys did it the right way. And I'm sure they're going to love that. But the bottom line is they showed unity in support of equality with each other and the ownership. And then when the national anthem started and the flag was displayed, they stood up at attention and they showed respect for the flag and for everyone who has fought and died for that flag. And I think that's the right way to go about it. You got your message across, and you did it in a way that should not offend anyone. And others can still disagree, but it shouldn't be offensive.
The president said those players should be fired. Would you, if
Yeah.
you owned the Dallas Cowboys?
If I owned the Dallas Cowboys, baby, I'd just be so happy I wouldn't know what to do. It'd be hard for me to get upset about anything, I think, at that point, David. No, listen, I think that the president has his right to his opinions, and he has his right to express his opinions the very same way those players have the right to express their opinions. And I do think that at times this kind of dichotomy in the popular coverage of this, that somehow everyone's standing up for the players' rights to do what they want to do, which I say I stand up for their right to do that too, but somehow the president shouldn't be able to do that. You may disagree with the president, fine. You may even think, as your earlier question implied, that he's spending too much of his time on it and should be spending time on other things. That's fine too. You're welcome to all those opinions. But so is he. He's welcome to his opinions on this too. And so I think that we should all just respect each other's rights to express these opinions. And I think we should stop being so sensitive. I think there's a little bit of a sensitivity here among everybody and a little overreacting. And I think you're going to see the NFL stuff pare back this weekend, because I think they understand that they may have overreacted a little bit to the president. Understandable that people get that way, but then take a deep breath. And I think as a week passed, I think you'll see a lot less of it this week. I think people have made their point, and we need to get back to like playing the games, watching the games, and doing all the other stuff the country has to do, and maybe get off of this. Yes, sir.
Governor, legislators in Washington have approved tax breaks for hurricane victims of Irma, Harvey, and Maria. But effort to, give tax breaks to people in the aftermath of Sandy was denied. What are your thoughts?
Well, listen, I haven't looked real closely at exactly what they did, but I've read how it's been characterized. I always stand up for the victims of Sandy being given equal treatment to the disaster victims of any other disaster across this country. I fought hard for that in the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy, much to the chagrin of my own party, and I continue to fight for that. So I don't want to get into the specific tax breaks because I haven't honestly looked at them closely enough because I knew we weren't getting them. But in general, the general proposition I stand for is our disaster victims should be treated no differently, and certainly not any less, than the victims of any other disaster across the country. Matt.
Governor, you said that Phil Murphy's running out the clock. That would suggest that, maybe he's feeling comfortable where he is and that all he needs to do
Or maybe he just doesn't have the answers, Matt.
perhaps.
Maybe he's not smart enough to answer the questions. Maybe he's not experienced enough to answer the questions. Maybe he's just scared to answer the questions. I mean, this is my problem with your reporting sometimes. You have a theory of what you think. You think he's running out the clock because he's comfortable. He could be trying to run out the clock because he's scared to call another play. And there's a whole bunch of different reasons you might run out the clock. So, he may be scared to say anything because people might look at it and say it's ill-founded or contrary to fact or stupid. It could be all those things. And then, that's another reason to run out the clock. So I don't know exactly why he's doing it, but clearly when you refuse to answer questions as fundamental as property taxes in New Jersey, then you're playing some kind of game. And it's not something that's either becoming or qualifies you for the governorship.
So, to the question I was going to ask is, do you think your second in command has enough time to plug the gap in whatever polls, whether it's 13 points or 20 points or what have you?
Sure.
I mean, is there plenty of time?
Sure. Go back and look at the polls in 2009. I think the majority of the polls in 2009 going into the last weekend had me losing. I know the Quinnipiac poll had me losing by like 6 points, and I know Monmouth had me losing, and there were a number of them that had me losing, and I wound up winning by 4.5 points. So, and need we hearken any further back to the presidential election? I mean, listen, I was on a conference call on election day getting exit poll results at 5:30 in the afternoon on election day, where they said the exit polls indicated that Hillary Clinton was going to get 345 electoral votes. I mean, I think they were only off by like 100. So like, I just caution everybody on these polls, okay? I mean, this is a very volatile electorate. And I don't think any of us have any idea what they're going to do, and we certainly don't have it from polling. How many more elections do the pollsters have to get wrong before we finally go, I mean, I understand, like, everybody likes to kind of hear about, on our end, and you cover the horse race. But, you know, they've been wrong so often. And, you know, to put it on the other side, in 2013, most of the polls had me winning by like 30, you know, going into election day. And I wound up winning by 20. Well, no difference. I still won by 22, but if you were betting, you know, Matt, and had a spread, you would have been really ticked. You would have lost money if you took me minus 30, you know? So, like, I just think these polls, like, you have to take a deep breath. So I think the lieutenant governor, we haven't had the debates yet. We haven't had the lion's share of advertising that's going to be done yet. And so I think there's a lot of time for her to be able to win an election that no one has won yet. And I don't think anybody should write anybody's obit or anybody's salutation before election night. You'll wind up having to eat it, potentially, and that's not good. Won't taste good. All right? Yeah.
Governor, on Puerto Rico, the president is going to be at his...
If you guys want to sit, you can too.
At his residential golf course in New Jersey this weekend. Is that appropriate for him to be there during the crisis?
Well, he's got to be somewhere. Listen, this is like when you guys ask me about being out of state or something. It's a fiction. I'm never off duty. I am never off duty. Joe Vitale called me when I was in Sicily. Okay, like I'm sitting at some outdoor cafe with my family eating dinner. The phone rings and it's Joe Vitale. You think I want to answer that call? I answered, and I spoke to him. Sandy Cunningham called me when I was in Sicily. Like, if you're governor or president, you're never off duty. You think they can't find him in Bedminster? Does it make a big difference whether he's at Bedminster or whether he's in Camp David? It doesn't make any difference. The White House travels with the president. He's got his advisors with him that stay in Bedminster. He's got all of his communication capability. He's got everything he needs. And if for some reason he had to get to Washington quick, they have Marine One to land on the golf course, to Air Force One, to Washington. He'd probably be back inside an hour. So I just think this is like, you know, form over substance. And if you guys want more substantive politicians, then stop harping on form. We went through this with the beach stuff at the budget time. Well, I know that you were still working, and I know you were here every day, but the perception was, if you guys keep covering perception over reality, then you're going to get the politics you deserve. So if the president wants to be in Bedminster this weekend, he's got to sleep somewhere. So if he feels more comfortable sleeping in Bedminster this weekend, great. If he wants to be at Mar-a-Lago, go to Mar-a-Lago. You want to go to Camp David, go to Camp David. But I'll tell you one thing he won't be able to do. You can't escape the presidency no matter where you go. You will be president, your aides will be with you, your equipment will be with you, your communications will be with you, and you'll be able to do your job. The same way when I'm governor, I can't escape the troopers, I can't escape the cell phone. If somebody wants me, they find me. I can't hide. It's a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week job. Doesn't mean I work all 24 hours, but it means I might have to. And it's the same way with the president, and to an even greater extent. So, like, these form over substance questions, I don't care. There are going to be some people who say he shouldn't be in Bedminster. I don't know why. He's got a house there. He's got to sleep somewhere. Got to have meals somewhere. So whether it's the White House or Camp David or Bedminster or Mar-a-Lago or the place in Virginia or any place else, who cares? He's president. He'll be on the job. If something happens, he'll answer the phone. I know that about him and about any president, by the way. President Obama was the same way.
Governor, Melania Trump said yesterday that she intends to make the opioid crisis the focus of her tenure. Do you know any more details about what she plans to do, and may that have any involvement with your commission
Well, she obviously asked me to be there yesterday. It was not my original plan to be there. I was only intending to be there on Wednesday. And then the First Lady called and asked if I would participate in her panel discussion on Thursday. So I changed my plans and stayed over on Wednesday night and stayed for her on Thursday. I'll do anything I can to help the First Lady become more deeply involved in this issue, because if we have her involvement, it brings greater visibility to the issue, which is part of what I'm trying to do here, obviously, is to eliminate stigma. And the more prominent public people we can get involved talking in a constructive way about solutions to this problem, the better chance we have of getting rid of stigma. So I welcome Melania to being more deeply involved in this. I'll do everything I can to try to help her get the people in front of her that she needs to be able to advocate for the position she wants to advocate for. So I thought it was a really good sign that she wants to do it. I was happy to participate, and myself and my chief of staff helped to put together the panel with her staff and with Kellyanne Conway's staff, and we're happy to be helpful in any way that we can. It's an important issue, and I'm glad to have the First Lady involved. It'll bring greater visibility to it.
On opioid initiatives, are you going to tell us today where the $200 million is going to come from for your state initiative?
Nah.
You just said Phil Murphy isn't answering any questions.
Yeah. Okay. I've answered plenty. Put up the number of questions I've answered compared to the ones he's answered. I'm doing better. Yeah.
Why won't you tell us?
I don't
Tell
want.
the state of New Jersey.
Well, I don't tell you because I don't want to, and I'll tell the people of New Jersey when they need to know.
What determines need to know?
Me. That's what I get paid for, David.
All right.
Hey, next.
Dr. What,
Yep.
what advice, if any, did you give the governor on an emotional level about what
He-
the weeks, the months, the years following, and what you...
Well, what I said to the governor was, first off, that you're brand new at this, and you need to understand that the people of your territory need to see you. And I said, every day they're going to try to lock you in that emergency operations center. Don't let them lock you in there all day, every day. You need to get out around the island. You need to see things for yourself, and you need to let the people know that you haven't forgotten about them. I said to him, secondly, going forward, this needs your personal attention every day for months and months and months ahead, because there'll be a new challenge every day in dealing with the federal bureaucracy, dealing with the Congress, in managing your own programs and finding people to come in to manage your programs, and you'll make some mistakes, you'll make some good decisions. But the thing is, 2 years into Sandy, I was still having weekly Sandy meetings. 2 years in. We were still meeting every week on Sandy. So I said to him, like, get ready for the long haul. This is going to eat up most of your first term. And, you know, your folks need to see you, need you to be visible, and need you to be hearing their concerns. And the biggest thing people are worried about right now, if the experience is similar to the one we had in Sandy, is they're afraid they're going to be forgotten. And you have to continue by both your actions and your words to reassure them every day that they're not going to be forgotten. And, you know, he had lots of good questions, and we've had a lot of good dialogue going back and forth. And you know, I have a lot of concern for anybody who's going through this, because it is a very, very stressful thing to have to go through. And the responsibility that you feel during times like this is monumentally greater than the everyday responsibility you feel as governor. So I'm just trying to walk him through that and get him ready. But bottom line is, all that'll happen is when he starts to feel those things, he'll remember back to, like, oh yeah, he said that. Because I got a lot of this stuff from Jeb Bush and from Haley Barbour in preparation for Sandy, and then I would think back months later, like, oh yeah, Jeb mentioned this or Haley mentioned that. I don't know that it really prepares you, is my point. Like, when you're experiencing it, you're experiencing it, and that's when it becomes real to you. But the advice does help set your mind in the right direction, I think, and that's all I'm trying to do. He knows his people better than I do, and he'll know exactly what needs to be done for his own people. He's obviously elected, and so he's got a certain resonance with the people already. And hopefully he's able to use that, along with any other advice that he gets from me or from anybody else who's gone through it, to be able to help him be effective during this. And if he is, then that'll help his people.
Do you have any kind words about Colonel Fuentes to President Trump lately when it comes to...
I've had so many kind words over the years to President Trump about Colonel Fuentes and what a great job he does. The president's always been concerned about security in New Jersey and safety, since he's a large property owner here. So I've always assured him that the state police was there when he had tournaments at his facilities. The state police was always willing to help supplement that, and that was certainly under Colonel Fuentes' command. And so I've always had great things to say about the colonel to the president. And if the president asks me any further questions about the colonel on any other topic, I think both he knows and the colonel knows that he'll get my complete, honest answer.
So no DEA talk with the president about Colonel?
No, I have not spoken to the president at all about the DEA and Colonel Fuentes. I've spoken about the DEA in general, but not the DEA and Colonel Fuentes. No, I have no direct talks with the president about that at this time. David.
Governor, I know you're not going to get into the sports talk business, but I can't pass up the opportunity to ask you to assess the Metropolitans for the last time.
The Mets.
Yes.
Yeah. That sucked, David. It was an awful season. They were terrible. I mean, they just were. I mean, you know, they're going to lose 90 games probably. If they win the rest of their games, I think they'll end up 72 and 90. And after you've had, you know, this is an unusual thing for a Mets fan, right, David? You know, 2 years in a row in the playoffs, which has only happened, I think, 2 other times in the franchise history that they've had, you know, 2 years in a row in the playoffs. So we were expecting much more this year. Obviously, the injuries were terrible and all the rest. But in the end, as Bill Parcells said, you are what your record says you are. And 72 and 90 sucks. So that's it. I mean, you know, I went to the game Monday night, kind of my sayonara to the Mets for 2017. So I went to the game with Mary Pat and Bridget on Monday night and said goodbye to the Mets for the season. And I mean, I may watch a little bit over the weekend, depending upon what my schedule is like. But that will only be just a contribution to my continued masochism as a Met fan. And that's all it really is. And as I've said to my children, you know, I've made them all Mets fans. It's the only team that they are required to root for, or they don't get fed. And, you know, they can go their own way and have gone their own way on other teams, but the Mets is the only one they're required to root for, which means I prepared them for a life of pain and disappointment. And it does frost me, of course, that the Yankees are in the playoffs too. As a Met fan, that's bad. The only thing that would have been worse is if the Phillies were in the playoffs. Thank God they're not. So, you know, it's a mixed bag, mostly negative. And I'm hoping that, you know, in the off season they wind up doing some things to make the team better, and I hope our players become a little less injury prone. That'd be nice. Yes, sir.
News 12, basically the Hoboken incident 365 days later, new thoughts, procedures, how you feel now?
Well, listen, I think that, you know, one, knowing now that it was human error that caused the accident, you know, gives you some reassurance. It's not a systemic problem with New Jersey Transit. It was a human problem. And so, you know, we wish those human problems wouldn't happen, but as long as we have human beings running our vehicles, you're going to have human error sometimes, and it was tragic and awful, but it happened. You know, I think New Jersey Transit has gone through a lot of re-examination of its safety procedures in the aftermath, made some changes. We're on track for positive track control, you know, being implemented by the federal deadline, and that will help in situations like that in particular to mitigate against human error. But listen, New Jersey Transit is the 3rd largest public transit agency in America. And it's going to continue to have challenges, both in my final 111 days here and in, you know, the 2,920 days of the next governor. And you're going to constantly be dealing with that, because when you're moving that many people in that many modes of transportation, rail, light rail, and bus, and you're doing it with human beings operating all those modes of transportation, you're going to have challenges. And the same way I've had challenges, the next governor will have challenges too. But I think they've learned a lot from what happened in Hoboken. And hopefully what they've learned will help to avoid the unnecessary loss of life which happened that day in Hoboken. I remember that day, it was a really difficult day. And whenever you have a loss of life that was completely unnecessary, it's hard. But hopefully they've learned from that. I believe they have. I believe they've already made improvements, and the PTC will be kind of the final step in that improvement by the end of 2018. Anything else? I get you all. Okay, well, everybody have a good weekend. Thank you for coming today. I want to thank the Colonel and the General. They have both been working extraordinarily hard all week to coordinate all of the people across New Jersey who want to help Puerto Rico to do so in a way that'll be most effective. I appreciate their leadership and the leadership that other law enforcement folks across the state are giving to sacrifice their time to be able to go down and help the folks that are in need. So thank you for covering that. And I wish Godspeed and the best of luck to all the men and women from New Jersey who are going to be going down to help folks in Puerto Rico, that they stay safe and that they help to bring some comfort to people who are really suffering right now. So y'all have a good weekend. Thank you very much.